Hello, I'm Samantha Kelly, and I will be talking today about equal rights for same-sex marriage. Here's my audience. There's Julia, and Steve, and Chris. Marriage is a human right. It is not reserved just for heterosexuals. Homosexuals are looking for the right to be married and enjoy marriage without the persecution with the stigma of being homosexual. This freedom can only be attained through the continuous pursuit to be equal not only in the eyes of the public but also in the eyes of the law. This is why we need to uphold the words of the Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by the Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Recently, our country has made vast improvements towards marriage equality, regardless of sexual orientation. However, we are not completely at equality yet. Currently, 50 states recognize heterosexual marriage, and 0 do not. 13 states and the District of Columbia recognize same-sex marriage, and 35 states say that it is illegal. Homosexuals struggle with unequal rights all around, but mostly with marriage. The government has established something called civil unions, which they say are equal to marriages, but they're not, because they do not necessarily have the same benefits. With civil unions or with different states not recognizing the marriages, they miss out on things like taxes. If you're married in a state that it recognizes same-sex marriages, but you live in a state that doesn't recognize it, you may miss out on tax benefits. Also, you may not be able to adopt a child because some adoptions don't recognize the civil unions, or they want the couples to be married before they can adopt. So these couples will miss out on actual adoptions, and they might not be able to have their own children. Death benefits are a big deal with same-sex marriages because when the spouse passes away, if you live in a state that doesn't recognize same-sex marriage, even though you were married in a state that did, you may not be able to get the benefits because you're not living in the state that recognizes it. Healthcare is also a big issue because the family health care usually has to do with marriage. If you're not legally married under that state, you cannot get the health care. The government and many people like to say that it's not an inequality, it's everything's equal, they just have a different name. It's not true. It is a minority discrimination. They are discriminating against those that are not like everybody else. The states that recognize same-sex marriage are the ones in the purple. There are only, as I said, 13 and the District of Columbia. They are the percentage of those who do not recognize same-sex marriage are a lot bigger than those who do recognize same-sex marriage. The biggest problem is if you live in a state that does not, let's say Texas. Texas is really far away from all the states that do recognize same-sex marriage. You'll have to use the expense to get to a state that recognizes it, and if your family wants to travel also, that is even more expense. So that may restrict people who don't make as much money. They are not able to get married just like everybody else. What can you do to help? You can. We need to reduce the social stigma of being homosexual. You need to make sure that if in your conversations with friends and family, you're not making homosexuals seem like less, because that just it increases the social stigma against it. You need to make sure, we as a country need to make sure this separation of church and state is there. You want to make sure that the laws, because current laws are basically based on religion. That's the biggest reason that people don't want same-sex marriages, is because they don't agree with their religion. But there's supposed to be a separation of church and state, according to our Constitution. We, as a country, also need to push for a national law, because if there's a national law, there will be no state differences. Everybody will be able to get married regardless of sexual orientation, which is very important. As a nation, over the years since we have started as the United States of America, we've grown a lot with just different discriminations. Until the 1920s, women could not vote. Women were not important in the government, and they had no say. Until 1967, interracial marriages were illegal over the United States. A few states allowed it, but mostly it was illegal. And it's basically the same fight that the homosexuals are fighting today with same-sex marriage, because because people don't agree with it. It's just a minority discrimination. The military is beginning to change this. It's very recent that spouses in same-sex marriages are able to get the same benefits as spouses of different sex marriages. Now there's no difference in the military, which is a big improvement. Now imagine the United States of America as an equal and free country with no discrimination, no difference in laws. Everybody is equal under the government, under the law. There's no changes. Despite the fact that citizens of the United States have claimed that we live in a country that is free and equal, we cannot truly live as a free and equal country until we stand up against discrimination, until all people are created free and equal under the law. Now is the time that we all need to stand together and stop all discrimination. Same-sex marriage, homosexuals are the same as, or fighting the same fight that gender discrimination and racial discrimination fought years ago. As such, we must stand together as a nation, a truly free nation, and grant equality to those who have been rejected. When this happens, then and only then can we be the land of the free. Thank you. Have a nice night.